Someone looked at your face and decided you were a problem. Not what you said, not what you did, just the way your face sits when you're not performing anything. When you're thinking, or processing, or simply existing in a room without narrating your inner state outward for everyone to read. That face, the one you have when no one asks you to have any particular face at all, that is the thing that has been treated for most of your life like a defect. You know exactly the moment it first happened. Someone pulled you aside, or they said it directly to a group, or they laughed about it like it was a harmless observation. You always look so serious. Are you okay? You look mad. You should smile more. And something in you registered not just the comment but the verdict underneath it, that the way your face rests naturally is inconvenient, that the absence of visible warmth reads as hostility, that a neutral expression on your specific face has been filed under threat. And here is what nobody says out loud. You have been quietly correcting for this ever since. You have walked into rooms with a preloaded expression. You have caught yourself mid-conversation manufacturing an affect you do not feel, just to smooth over whatever discomfort your default face creates in other people. You have left interactions exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with the conversation itself. Exhausted from the maintenance, the management, the constant low-level performance of being legible to people who require you to be. They called it resting bitch face, or they said you were unapproachable, or they just kept asking if something was wrong when nothing was wrong, which, over enough time, starts to feel like a very specific kind of accusation. Here is what this video is about. That accusation is not about you. It never was. It starts young, usually. Before you have any framework for understanding what social performance is, or why people demand it, you learn that your face produces the wrong reaction in adults. A teacher flags it in front of the class. A parent asks why you always look so unhappy when they've given you no reason to be unhappy. A relative at a family gathering corners you to say you looked bored during the entire meal, and you were not bored. You were thinking, or observing, or simply sitting inside your own head the way you always do. But their discomfort with your expression has now become a correction, directed at you, and so the calibration begins. You learn to pull your face into shapes it does not naturally take. A slight upward tilt at the corners of the mouth, a softening around the eyes, an orientation of the head that signals engagement and openness, even when what you are actually doing is processing something internally, or not processing anything at all, just being a person in a room. You learn that the absence of visible warmth on your face will be read as its opposite, as coldness, as disdain, as a declaration of disinterest you did not make. You perform this calibration at work. You perform it on first dates. You perform it in job interviews, in family dinners, in casual conversations with people you barely know and will likely never see again. Because you have learned over a long time that the moment you let your face relax into its natural position, someone will take it personally. And the interior monologue that runs during all of this, here it is, as precisely as it can be stated. They think I'm in a bad mood. They're uncomfortable. Should I say something? If I say something, it'll seem like I noticed, and then it's a whole thing. Maybe I should just make more eye contact. Not more. They're pulling back. I can see it. They've decided something about me already, and nothing I say is going to undo it. This is exhausting. I'm exhausted, and the conversation hasn't even started yet. Types. You run that loop, maybe not in those exact words, but in that shape. And what is remarkable about it is not that it happens. It is how automatic it has become. You do not decide to run that monologue. It simply activates the way a subroutine activates, because your nervous system learned years ago that an unmanaged face creates social friction, and social friction is a problem to be avoided. Then comes the suppression attempt, the deliberate warmth, the manufactured openness, and this is where it becomes something more corrosive than inconvenience, because you are not just managing your expression, You are managing other people's comfort at the cost of your own coherence. You are performing a version of yourself that is slightly, persistently not you. And if you do this long enough, you begin to lose the thread of what your actual face feels like from the inside. You begin to believe that the managed version is the acceptable version and the natural version is the defective one. The social history of this trait follows you. It follows you across environments that you thought would be different. You left the family that criticized it and went to a workplace that pathologized it. You left that workplace and entered a relationship where it was periodically raised as evidence of emotional unavailability. The label changes: unapproachable, cold, intimidating, hard to read. But the underlying accusation is the same. Your face does not do enough work for the people looking at it. And underneath all of the social friction, underneath the exhaustion and the performance and the accumulated weight of other people's discomfort with how you look when you are not looking for their approval, there is a real question, not the one you were trained to ask, which is, what is wrong with my face? The real question is sharper than that. The real question is this: why is the absence of warmth treated as the presence of hostility? And what does it mean that the people around you cannot distinguish between those two things? That is the question this video is actually answering. After point 1, the label is wrong, and the wrong label is doing specific damage. After resting bitch face is not a face. It is a social verdict. The phrase was invented to describe what happens when a person's neutral expression fails to perform friendliness, when the absence of performed warmth gets decoded by observers as active hostility. Notice what that requires. It requires observers who cannot process neutrality as neutral. Observers who, when they encounter a face that is not signaling anything, fill that blank with something threatening, then blame the face for the threat they invented. The label itself is a category error. It treats the absence of expression as an expression. It treats a face at rest as a face making a statement. And it targets, with enormous consistency, people whose default expression happens to land outside the narrow band of performed agreeableness that certain social environments require as a condition of acceptance. You are not diagnosed. You were failed by the interpretive range of the people around you. The label is wrong because neutrality is not a message. The face that has been called cold is simply a face that is not performing temperature. Point 2. This trait has an origin, and that origin is not a malfunction. People who move through the world with a naturally still face are not, as a rule, emotionally absent. Research on facial expressivity is consistent on this point. There is no reliable correlation between the degree to which a person expresses emotion outwardly and the degree to which they experience emotion internally. Some people process intensely while showing little. Some people show everything and process shallowly. The surface tells you almost nothing about what is underneath. What the still face usually indicates, and this is worth sitting with, is a person who has learned to keep their internal experience separate from their social presentation. This is not repression. It is a particular form of self-containment that tends to develop in people who grew up in environments where emotional display had consequences, or who are naturally oriented toward internal processing before external expression. The face does not broadcast because the person has learned, correctly, in many contexts, that premature broadcasting invites interference. The natural function of a still face is not to withhold. It is to protect internal process from external noise. Your face is not a broken signal. It is a deliberate boundary built over years for very good reasons. Your face is not failing to express. It is expressing something specific, that what is happening inside you is not for public consumption until you decided it is. Point 3. The people who judge this trait are telling you something precise about themselves. When someone looks at a neutral face and registers hostility, they are not reading you. They are reading their own requirement. What is that requirement? The requirement that the people around them continuously signal that they are okay, that the environment is safe, that no one is displeased, that the social temperature is being maintained. This is an anxiety management strategy. It is not insight. The need to read everyone's face in a room, to constantly calibrate your own safety based on the expression states of others, is a specific psychological pattern. One rooted in environments where facial expressions were actually dangerous, where a shift in someone's affect meant something was about to go wrong. People who grew up that way often become very good at reading faces. They also become very bad at tolerating the absence of readable faces because the absence itself triggers the alarm. When someone tells you that you look unapproachable, they are telling you that they rely on continuous facial reassurance to feel safe. That is not your diagnosis. That is theirs. Their discomfort with your neutral face is not evidence that your face is wrong. It is evidence that they cannot regulate without the performance they expect from you. Point 4. The unexpressive face, unmanaged and unsuppressed, produces a specific and measurable advantage. People who stop managing their expressions toward others' comfort stop attracting certain kinds of relationships. Specifically, they stop attracting people who need continuous emotional performance as a condition of engagement. Those people, when they encounter a face that does not perform for them, tend to move on quickly, which is not a loss. It is a filter. What remains after that filter operates are people who are capable of engaging with someone whose internal state is not constantly legible. People who can sit across from a quiet face and interpret it as quiet rather than hostile. People who are secure enough in themselves that they do not need your face to reassure them every 15 seconds that the relationship is intact. The still face is a precision instrument for sorting. It removes people who need to be managed and retains people who do not. Most of the unapproachable people who have learned to own this trait will tell you the same thing. They have fewer relationships and better ones. The toll it used to take to maintain warm performance for people who required it has been converted into energy, available for the connections that actually work. Your unexpressive face has been doing selection work this entire time. You have been treating its output as rejection. It is discernment. Point 5. The difference between this trait suppressed and this trait owned is the difference between a wound and a tool. When this trait is suppressed, when you perform warmth, you do not maintain an expression that costs you energy and apologize for the face your face makes. The trait does not disappear. It turns inward. The energy spent on facial management is energy taken from actual thinking, actual presence, actual engagement with what is in front of you. You become more visually legible and less actually there. You perform presence while evacuating it. When this trait is owned, when you stop treating your natural expression as a liability and start treating it as information about who you actually are, something shifts in the quality of your interactions. You are more present because you are not spending half your processing running the management protocol. The people who engage with you do so with accurate information, not with a performance you constructed for their comfort. The relationships that form are with the actual you, not with the affect-managed version. There is also a secondary effect that is rarely discussed. When you stop performing warmth, you do not feel. The warmth you do feel becomes legible. The moments when your face does move, when something strikes you, when you are genuinely pleased, when you are actually engaged, carry real information because they are not drowned out by a constant, low-level performance of manufactured warmth. The contrast is what gives genuine expression its signal value. When you suppress this trait, you become uniformly warm and completely unreadable. When you own it, you become selectively expressive and entirely honest. That is not a small distinction. That is the difference between a face that performs and a face that means something. The language you use internally to describe this trait determines everything about how you carry it. And right now, the language you are probably using is borrowed from the people who judged you. I'm unapproachable. I look angry when I don't mean to. I have resting bitch face. That language locates the problem inside your face, as though your face is defective hardware producing incorrect output. Replace it, not with flattery, with precision. The replacement is not, "I have a strong face," or "I'm just an intense person." Those are still reactive framings, still positioning yourself relative to the judgment. The precise replacement is this: "My face is at rest when I am not performing for an audience." That is a description, not an apology, and not a defense. It is a statement of observable fact. Your face does what faces do when a person is not in performance mode. The performance mode is optional. You have been treating it as mandatory. A further language replacement for the moments when someone raises this directly. The internal language shifts from "they think something is wrong with me" to "they need something from me that I have not agreed to provide." That is the accurate framing. No one is owed a performance of warmth from your face. The discomfort someone else feels at the absence of that performance is their relationship to manage, not yours. Precision in your internal language is not cosmetic. It determines the posture you take into every room, and every room will go differently depending on whether you walk into it believing your face is broken or believing your face is at rest. Shift to the environment audit. Shift to the environment audit. Not every environment treats a still face the same way. All you can do is get precise about which environments cost you and which do not. There are environments built on performed warmth as a structural requirement, customer-facing roles, certain social cultures, families organized around emotional display as a form of loyalty. In those environments, your natural face will create friction. Not because you are in the wrong, but because the environment was built on a premise about how people should look. That friction is real. It has real consequences. Knowing this is not a reason to suppress your face. It is information about the cost of operating in that environment, which you may or may not choose to pay. There are also environments where a still face is either neutral or actively advantageous. Analytical work, leadership context negotiations, environments where calm reads as competent rather than cold. In those environments, the face you have been apologizing for is an asset you have been treating as a liability. The audit is not complex. It requires only that you stop treating your face as the variable and start treating the environment as the variable. Your face is a constant. Environments differ in how they interpret that constant. What needs to change is not your face. What needs to change is which environments you accept as the standard by which you measure yourself. Shift 3. The response protocol is: the next time someone says, "Are you okay?" you look upset, or "You should smile more," or "You seem unapproachable." You need an internal response that does not pull you back into the old loop. Not an external response, an internal one. The two-sentence protocol is this: this person is telling me about their own comfort level, not about my state. I know what my state is. Tide is. That is the complete protocol. Read it again. The first sentence breaks the reflex that translates their discomfort into your defect. The second sentence reinstates the most basic form of self-knowledge. You are in a better position than anyone else to know what your face is doing and why. The moment you accept someone else's reading of your face as more accurate than your own experience of your interior state, you have handed over something that was never theirs to hold. You can respond externally however context requires, with a brief clarification, or with silence, or with a simple, "I'm fine." What matters is that the internal response does not concede the premise. The premise being that their discomfort is evidence of your dysfunction. You know your state. That is not arrogance. That is just being the person who lives inside your experience, which is a position no one else has access to. Shift 4, the ownership statement. Ownership is not the same as pride. Pride is reactive. It is the response to a threat, the refusal to be diminished. Ownership is quieter than that. Ownership is the mental posture of someone who has stopped arguing about whether their face is acceptable and simply knows that it is theirs. The person who owns this trait does not explain themselves. They do not apologize in advance. They do not front-load warmth at the beginning of an interaction to preempt the judgment they are afraid is coming. They walk into a room with their face doing whatever it does, and they are aware without distress that some people will misread it and some people will not, and that this sorting process is providing them with accurate information about the room. They also do not perform neutrality as a statement. Ownership is not the same as choosing to be cold to prove a point. That is still reactive, still operating in reference to the judgment. Ownership is the absence of reference to the judgment entirely. It is the state of being so settled in your own read of your own face that the external commentary simply does not reorganize you. The specific mental posture is this: you are not managing your face for the room. You are not managing the room's reaction to your face. You are present in the interaction, attending to what is actually happening, and your face is where it is. That is all. No protocol, no preparation, no maintenance cost. That is what ownership looks like from the inside. Not confidence, just the absence of the performance and the quiet that comes after it. There is a larger pattern underneath everything this video has described, and it is worth naming it directly before you leave. The thing that has been happening to you, the judgment of your face, the pressure to perform warmth, the accumulated cost of managing your expression for other people's comfort. That specific experience is one instance of a larger pattern. The pattern is this: you have been measured, for most of your life, against a standard of legibility that was built for people whose interior experience naturally produces visible output. People whose internal state expresses readily on their faces, whose warmth is reflexive, whose engagement is physically broadcast. The standard was not built for people who process internally before expressing externally. It was not built for people who keep their inner state separate from their social presentation until they decide otherwise. It was not built for you, and the result of being measured against a standard that does not fit you is that you have been treated as failing at something you were never actually doing. You have been graded on an exam that was not written for how your mind works. Every judgment, unapproachable, cold, hard to read, intimidating, is the output of a scoring system applied to the wrong student. This is not an excuse. It is not a comfort. It is just accurate. Here is what is actually true about you. Read that now you have an interior life that is not continuously available as a public broadcast. You process before you express. You hold your experience internally before you choose to share it, and you share it selectively with people who have demonstrated that they can hold it without distorting it. That is not emotional unavailability. That is discernment about where you invest your emotional presence, and the people who have called your face the problem were almost universally people who wanted access to your interior experience without earning it, who wanted the broadcast before they had established a relationship that would make the broadcast appropriate. Your face was doing exactly the right thing. It was holding a boundary at the level of expression because the relationship had not yet established that it was safe to be fully legible. You were protecting something real. The judgment was delivered as though you were withholding something owed. You were not. What you were withholding was never theirs to begin with. The people who matter, the ones who are built for actual engagement with someone whose internal state does not constantly leak outward, they are not troubled by your face. They are paying attention to what you say and how you say it and what you do with your attention. They are not waiting for a smile to confirm that you are present. They are already receiving you. Clearly, you were never the problem in the room. You were the one in the room who was being asked to perform and declining and being punished for the decline. You owe no performance. Your face is not a message for anyone. It is just your face, at rest in the room, doing nothing wrong.